I was like 7 or 8. They ended up sexually assaulting me, doing a number on everything, regards to God, regards to faith. The church didn't handle it, didn't engage with it. Why would a good God allow this to happen to me?
Ruslan is one of the most recognizable Christian influencers today. He's a popular YouTuber, rapper, and author of the new book, Godly Ambition.
Yeah.
We're going to look at your life, your assessment of the church today, and a warning you have for young Christians. This is long overdue, but thanks for coming on, man.
Man, thanks for having me. Yeah, I had you on about a year ago.
Yeah, a couple times.
Conversation, yeah.
A couple times you've been on. Well, I want to start with your story. I know you were not born in the States. You were not a Christian growing up. Tell us about your family growing up.
Yeah, so I'm ethnically Armenian, but raised in a country called Azerbaijan, Baku, which is just to the east of Armenia. And Armenia and the Turks have a long ongoing thing from the Armenian genocide. And so Turkey, Azerbaijan, often referred to as two nations, two people, one state.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of deep ethnic cleansing in that region of Armenians. And so long story short, in the 80s, we had something called the Pogroms of Baku, which was over, I think I want to say the year 1988 to 1990, about 500,000 Armenians were ethnically cleansed from Azerbaijan. And me and my family came as refugees because of that. Massive violence in the streets, hundreds of folks killed. And it was very, crazy for my family. My dad had to leave early. Me and my mom stayed behind because my mom's adopted by an Armenian family, but she's ethnically Russian or Ukrainian. I'm not quite sure on my 23andMe. When I ran it said half Russian, half Ukrainian. And so because we were fair-skinned, we stayed behind longer to kind of settle the affairs. And yeah, came to the United States as a refugee in 91. My mom was the only
one. So you were how old?
I was 6.
Oh, wow.
To San Diego, which is a very different San Diego than it is now,
That's
in
true.
the City Heights area, folks who are familiar with San Diego. And subsequently, after my mom and my dad split, because of infidelity on both sides. And so I end up being exposed to God in the first context. We had no God in the Soviet Union because Azerbaijan was under the Soviet Union. So there's no faith, no God. And my first exposure to it is in the Armenian Orthodox Church, which was very interesting, a part of the Oriental arm of the Orthodox Church. So think Ethiopian, Armenian. So I end up getting christened. I become an altar boy. I'm a part of the whole thing. I love being an altar boy because you can't discard the blood of Christ with the communion wine. So they let the altar boys finish the communion wine. This is true. This could be verified.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. So you think 7 years old.
We have grape juice in the Baptist church, man.
Yeah. We were doing a real thing. So 7 years old, and then something happened where there was some older altar boys who were like early teens, like 12, 13, 14. I was like 7 or 8. They ended up sexually assaulting me, and that ended up just completely doing a number on everything. Regards to God, regards to faith, regards to how the church didn't handle it, didn't engage with it, and just kind of checked out. And I remember in 4th grade, I got my ear pierced, and I came to the church, and my terchai, my priest at the time, like sat me down and confronted me about my earring, and like quotes Leviticus to me, and I'm like, dude, like, what?
Even in 4th grade, it's like something's messed up.
And then my mom was bitter at the church because they remarried my dad, which they technically shouldn't have because he, according to her, was never divorced from her. So she goes down this downward spiral of alcohol. She does not like the church. I don't like the church because of what happened. And so I had to have been the youngest atheist on the face of the earth. 4th, 5th grade, I'm like, there is no God.
Like you would say that, like you just flat out, no life after death, God doesn't exist.
Yep.
Was it a combination of like the indoctrination or the teaching about God or just your experience of pain in the church or all of the above?
I think for me it was the problem of evil. Like why would a good God allow this to happen to me? Why would a good God have my father leave? Why would a good God, allow me to go through this sort of stuff with, being exposed to sexuality at a very early age and the sexual assault and the way it was handled. Those were the questions that I was kind of wrestling with initially. And then that sent me down just a crazy spiral of, drugs, alcohol, we were breaking into homes, so I got arrested at age 11 for breaking into a home.
11 years old,
Yeah.
you were arrested.
Yeah, I was caught hanging out of a bathroom window of a condo around the corner because we were trying to bail out our gang leader.
Wow.
Yeah, and so, my mom's a single mom. She's frustrated. She's like, dude, like you're out of control. And my first like real exposure to the gospel was when I got arrested. I had to do some community service. I was so young, they would just kind of like do 30 hours of community service and
Okay.
like we'll leave you alone. The older kids that got arrested with me, theirs was a bit more serious. Like they had like they had a probation officer and this whole thing. I just had to do community service, and I ended up doing it at a church that was connected to some folks in my apartment complex, Black Baptist Church. And that was the first time in the mid-90s that I'm starting to hear about Jesus, and they're telling me, God has a plan for you, God loves you. And I'm like, no, like there is no God. And if there is a God, he definitely doesn't love me. And that was my mindset. And they had this sweetness to them where they exhibited grace and truth. There was like an acceptance of like, you're a messed up kid and we love you right where you are, but God has so much more than you. And then, it turned into these weird, like kind of prophetic moments where it was like, God's going to do great things with you someday. You're going to speak.
Like they would tell you that and speak that to you.
And anyone that knows like the idiosyncrasies of the Black Baptist Church, they're not Pentecostals. They're not there's a prophetic word every week type. Like their theology is a bit more conservative with regards to some of that stuff.
Sure.
And so I would get these, multiple people would give me these weird kind of words, and I was just like, no, you guys don't get it. And then as I'm getting off probation, I have to do community service. So I'm doing it at the Black Baptist Church. I'm around Charlie and Willie who are taking me out, and they're kind of playing as these like pseudo father figures to me because my dad wasn't really around. And 8th grade, we ended up relocating from the Normal Heights, City Heights area to Vista, which was like a suburban-ish, slower pace of life. And that was like my shot at like, okay, I knew that like I wasn't a tough guy. Like we didn't have guns. We weren't like fighting and like we were just breaking into houses, stealing from stores, smoking weed, that sort of stuff. Moved to Vista, and it was like a clean slate. It was like, okay, cool. Like I knew that this was a fresh start.
You could have a clean slate in those days. It's a little harder today with social media, but you could start over. That's good.
Yeah. And so I was like, man, I'm going to go all in on basketball. Like I'm going to be a professional basketball player.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
And then my mom's boyfriend sat me down and explained a little something called genetics. It was like, look,
I've been giving that talk a lot. I didn't listen. I still tried.
I tried my heart out. And then I ended up getting into basketball and music because, you're coming from, impoverished areas. You don't see a lot of opportunities to do anything. And so it was like sports and entertainment. And the end of my freshman year, I won this talent show at Bringle Terrace Park. And I meet this girl at the talent show, and we start talking, we start dating. And the only way I could see her over the summer is if I went to church with her and her family on Sundays. And so I just casually start going
I love it.
to a church, and I'm, whatever, like I'm here. But then like something just started to click slowly. The message of hope, the gospel, the idea that Jesus loves me, just slowly started to click. Me and the girl break up, and now there's a Jehovah's Witness girl I'm dating.
Oh.
And so now, and I got Mormon friends, and this is right around 9/11, and this is like, I'm, I have a very diverse palette in terms of beliefs. We're talking about aliens, all of it. And I remember dating a Jehovah's Witness girl, reading Reasoning for the Scriptures, trying to hear them out. And at that point, I was convinced like Jesus is the Son of God, but he's not God Almighty. He's not Yahweh. And so then I spent time trying to detangle that. And my sophomore year, the beginning of my sophomore year, I lied on my application. I said I was 16 when I was 15. And I ended up getting a job at Pizza Hut. Now, this is how amazing how God works, is that working at Pizza Hut, my manager and our lead delivery driver, the one that had been there the longest, were both Christians.
Both of them.
And so we're in the back, Pizza Hut, you got to prep the dough, prep pizzas. We're in the back. He's finishing a shift. We're just talking, and I'm a theist at this point.
Mm.
But I'm confused. I'm confused as all get out. But I'm still going to this like church, but there's no one's explaining apologetics. No one's explaining any of this sort of stuff. It's just like a good inspirational church on Sundays. And I'm wrestling with this. And so I start talking to this dude, and the manager's name was Barbara. And I'm telling them like, hey, yeah, I don't think Jesus is God. I think he's the Son of God. And he's like, hey, I got you. And he brings me the new evidence that demands a verdict.
Amazing.
By your dad.
Yep.
And as a sophomore in high school, I get this academic-sized textbook, and I ended up reading it, and that's kind of what like got my head on straight with regards to the theology side of things.
Amazing.
And then it was another year of like wrestling and getting out of that relationship, still being sexually immoral, going back to the Christian girl, still being sexually immoral, wrestling through it. But I at least had I understood with what I believed. And then after that, finally, the end of my junior year, like I fully surrendered my life to Jesus and started a Bible study at that same church called The Vessel, which was an open mic and Bible study. And so we had 100 young people coming every Thursday. It outgrew many of their ministries. And yeah, I really haven't looked back since. But kind of what I ran into is like, okay, cool. I believe in Jesus. I'm in church. I'm in a community group. I'm reading my Bible.
Yep.
But I still have all these issues. Like I'm still wrestling with sin. I'm still struggling with porn. I'm still doing these things. And I would read, Every Young Man's Battle. Read it multiple. I would read these books, but there was no like, okay, and now what? Right? Like I get the theology. I get the community. I get the Bible. But like, what am I supposed to do day to day as a young man full of testosterone, with hopes and dreams? A lot of trauma.
Yeah.
We weren't talking about therapy and counseling back then as much, right? How do I navigate this? And so that's kind of the overflow of that, the culmination of that is like where the book Godly Ambition ends up flowing out of. Yeah.
We're going to come to that book. I have so many questions I want to ask you about this. Camera won't pick it up, but my dad is here watching. They came this morning, wanted to meet you.
Super cool. I got him to sign my new evidence that demands a verdict.
That's so special to hear. That's a part of your story. So he talks about reliability of the Bible, deity of Christ, resurrection, and that. It sounds like you kind of believed the Bible was true on some level.
Yes. You
had to be convinced Jesus is God. Were there any certain passages or stories that made you go, Jesus is God? Or was it just reading the whole Bible through a new lens was like, wow, this guy's divine?
I think reading those sections in the book about the deity and then going back and just reading John is like, oh yeah, this is so obvious now, And so, yeah, I would say that.
The book of John is incredible. The deity is all over it. From in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. John 5, John 8, John 10, John 20. Deity is everywhere. All right, so I want to shift to your channel. I kind of remember when you start on YouTube, right away I was like, oh, this guy is going to make waves and make a difference. You could just see it. Over the past year, your channel has grown 226,000 subscribers. I'm curious why you think it's grown. Now, there's one level where you're ambitious, hence your book, you're smart, you're strategic, but you're obviously scratching where people itch. So what is it about who you are that people are drawn to watch it and what you do?
I'd like to think that I have made an effort to care about what other people care about. My favorite parts of history class, my sophomore year, my senior year, I had a class with a guy named Mr. Hidalgo. And I loved history because what Mr. Hidalgo would do is almost every day we'd open with current events. We'd open with what's going on in the world today, the news.
Great.
And then he would tie that into stuff in history and connect it to stuff in history. And it was always the most just captivating to me. Like, we're going to talk about something relevant. We're going to talk about something that like is happening right now. And I think that was just something I've always enjoyed. And then like when I started leading Bible studies, you have these folks that are coming in and they have all these anxieties and all these worries and this happened and that and 9/11, and all this craziness that's happening. And so we would open with whatever's happening and the concerns and the fears and anxieties that people would have, and then segue into what Scripture has to say about it. And so I think YouTube was just an overflow of that because I just started listening to my audience. Initially, I was on YouTube and I really didn't even want to talk about my faith much because I was a Christian hip hop artist. And so I was like, I'm going to be on here to help Christian hip hop artists make a living and pursue their art. So a lot of it was marketing videos and life videos and that sort of stuff.
Mm.
But then like my audience, I was doing these weekly review streams of their music. People would send me their music, they would review. And I wasn't like the biggest Christian hip hop artist, but I'd made a living providing for me and my wife and my son, living in Southern California. That's like
Yeah.
0.1% of artists in general as an independent artist.
For sure.
And I would just give people advice. And then they started asking me more questions. They started asking me about this thing or that thing and this scandal and this and just trying to like, hey, like, how do I process this? And I remember it was really around the time, I want to say, of Ravi Zacharias, and people they were just so burdened by it, and just started asking me, and I would just give my opinion on stuff, and like that for whatever reason resonated with people, and then they asked me more. And the end of 2020 during the lockdowns, I was like, you know what, let me lean into this a bit more. I was already probably active on YouTube for like a year and a half. I think I was at maybe 15,000 subscribers. And I was just doing podcast clips, just like this, me and my friends backstage at shows, podcast clips. And then I started doing live streaming. And then I said, well, let me combine what people actually want from me and lean into the conversations. I think it's in Philippians where, he says, consider others above yourself, like consider other needs. And so it's like, if I have a degree of insight based on being in small groups, leading Bible studies for 15 years, let me lean into that expertise and the felt needs of what people are going through.
I love hearing that it traces back to a teacher, because I taught high school before I came to Biola 21 years.
Okay.
And I would do a lot of days where we just pick a news story. And my angle was, how do we think biblically about this? And there's always some biblical angle, but you start with where people are at, a felt need and interest, tie it into history, tie it into Bible. I don't do that on my channel, but I can see the power and significance and importance of approaching things that way. I had no idea there's backstory. That's cool. So there's a lot of concerns about the church, and you're addressing issues that are popping up. But if you had to make like of a broad sweep of the evangelical church today, how do you assess it? Like, what are we missing? What do we need to do better in this cultural moment?
I think the evangelical church, which often gets overlapped with conservative Christians, whether for good or for bad.
Yeah, agreed.
Lacks vision for how we are to serve the marginalized and the distraught globally and locally. And when there's not a clear vision casted for it, the trickle-down effects aren't good. And so then it bleeds into politics, and we can not that we are, because I think the data doesn't support this, but we can come off a bit distant, a bit callous, a bit hardened to hurting people and the craziness that this world. And I think if we casted a vision for how to serve people, how to love people, how to lead people, how to be the city on a hill, how to be the salt of the earth, how to be the light of the world, I think if we were more intentional to cast that vision, we would make more progress, I think, in a lot of regards. And so when we haven't, or we don't, not that we don't do it, it's just the packaging of these things, then the world will hijack things like charity and quote unquote empathy and all these things which really aren't biblical. Like there's a perversion of how they go about some of these things. And I think we just haven't been clear, and we haven't casted that vision. And so then when that overlaps with, which I am conservative, I've grown way more conservative, I felt very pushed to the right the last couple of years. When that overlaps with politics, I think you're talking about like the harshness of how capitalism can come off, the harshness of how like, hey, we are going to legislate morality, and we don't care what you think about it, right? Like that can come off very callous to people who are blind and don't have ears to hear, eyes to see. So I think what we could do better, in my opinion, is cast a vision for love, unity, charity, beauty, goodness, and hopefully be known more by the things we're for and not by the things we're against.
I'm not sure what I expect you to say, but I don't think I expect you to say that. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I'm an apologist, so I'm always talking about how we defend the faith and advance the case. One thing Os Guinness has said is if we don't have credibility, it doesn't matter what we say and what we argue for. Well, if we're not doing the things you're talking about, nobody's going to say, I want to be a part of that team, I want to be part of that club, because of the hypocrisy that's there. And the other thing that's amazing, it's not like here's some new vision we need today. You're kind of saying, let's just go back to actually what Jesus did, what Paul did, what the Bible talks about. I mean, there's been all this discussion recently about diversity. And it's like, okay, diversity is built into the Christian worldview. The character of God, one God, three persons, marriage, heaven of every nation. And so in some ways, we don't really need a new vision. You're saying, let's lean into what Jesus really taught and live it out bottom up. Love that. At some point, I'd love to have a conversation what that could look like, to cast that vision, to live that out in the church. Let's come back to it. I got another question for you. There's been a lot of talk recently about kind of the God conversation shifting. And I think one of the people that really kicked this off was Justin Brierley in his book, The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God. He kind of pieced some things together.
He called that early, man.
He called it early and took
Justin.
criticism for it. But we keep seeing these stories pop up, like Pew Research. Some of the nuns at least has slowed down. The one in the UK recently about, I think it was, I don't know, a decade or two ago, like 4% of 16 to 24-year-olds went to church. Now it's like 16%. We're seeing these conversions like on Ion Hersey Ali. Do you agree with that, given where you're at? Are you sensing a new openness in spiritual things and God compared to the new atheists in the past?
I would say with Gen Z, yes. I'd say with Gen Z, yes, because that one, the data shows it, right? I want to say, is it 48% of Gen Z is Jesus curious or open to Jesus?
Yeah, that's right.
That's a lot of people. I would say with my generations, millennials, I think they have backdoored so many interesting things around worldview and ideology with Christianity that, like, when they leave the church, they go the opposite extreme. They swing all the way to a very, in my opinion, disoriented, deconstructed, incoherent framework sometimes, not all the time. But I think Gen Z has not been as corrupted by some of the cultural issues as the millennials have been. And again, I'm not trying to. People have struggled with the faith for as long as there's been Christianity.
They always
right?
will.
The what is it? What is the phrase? The dark, the soul, the crisis of the soul,
Dark night of the soul.
The dark night of the soul, right? But I think millennials really went through it 2016 to 2020.
Okay.
And so now the Gen Z, they don't have that same baggage. And so they're just looking at Jesus and the claims of Jesus. And yes, that does impact other things. And they seem to at least acknowledge that it's a more coherent and functional framework of the world. And that brings me a lot of hope. So is there a massive revival happening and all these sorts of things? I don't know. I mean, I will say, like, when I'm seeing Brandon Lake and Phil Wickham in stadiums, and I'm seeing Forrest Frank, be in arenas with 12,000 people on weekdays, something seems to be shifting. Something seems to be shifting. And I think that folks have, these generations, like the Gen Z, like they're the most marketed to generation. And I think they're just tired of, like, repeatedly being told or indirectly told that, like, hey, like, you're just a highly evolved animal in heat, and, like, you just need to, go at the whim of your most primal urges, and, like, that's what you're supposed to do. I think they go, there's something deeper here. There's something more transcendent. There's something more beautiful than just, like, let me just live my most primal instincts. And I like that, and they're willing to lean in and ask the hard questions. So I get that sense from Gen Z, yeah.
The Volume 3 Barna study on Gen Z, if I remember correctly, it's about half of Gen Zers haven't been to church in the past year. Now, someone can interpret that as a lack of spiritual curiosity. I think they're curious, but they're not going to the traditional routes of just go to church that others have in the past. I think they lack the bad experience with the church in some ways that previous generations did. Some of the deconstruction movement and some of the stuff you're talking about is reacting to bad experiences. I don't think they have that bad experience, but also the lack of knowledge in the church. And hence, you're right. I think that other study by Barna about spiritual openness is like, this is an open, curious generation. I'm not going to call it revival, but I do sense an openness and an interest in my experience as well.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about you, Ruslan, is you're willing to talk with people who see the world differently than you do. I do this a lot. Sometimes I take criticism for it, whether it's progressive Christians, atheists, agnostics, you name it, looking for common ground. Why do you prioritize those conversations? And what's your goal when you bring on people, not just Christians who differ over whatever theological issue, people with a completely different worldview?
Mhm.
Why do you prioritize that?
I think there's utility in hopefully highlighting how we can disagree with people. I don't always do it perfect.
Me neither,
I
for the record.
sometimes, I sometimes crash out on people. Unfortunately, the Alex O'Connor moment wasn't my best.
I love that interview. I don't
Yeah.
even remember. We don't have to revisit it, but I love that you had him on after the
Yeah.
West Huff thing. And I
Yeah.
remember you guys pushed back and
Yeah.
disagreed, but
Yeah,
you got huge kudos to me just for doing that.
yeah. I think that would have been. I think that would have went better in person. I think we would have had a much better conversation.
I could see that. Yeah.
Because he was irritated and I was irritated that he was irritated. Anyway, but yeah, I think there's utility in hopefully demonstrating how to have these conversations, because
Yeah.
people are having these conversations at Thanksgiving dinner. They're having these conversations at Christmas dinner. They're most people are around folks they disagree with. And so I think there's utility in that. I also think there's cautionary tales that we can learn from the folks that have deconstructed and deconverted. And again, I don't want to hypergeneralize and say that all of it is invalid or anything like that, right?
Sure.
But I think there is utility. So like one of my favorite people to talk to, and I do consider this dude a friend, is like Tim from the New Evangelicals. Like I really like Tim. He's a good hang. And I think there's a lot to learn in terms of like what shifted and what caused him to go the progressive direction. I think my friend Heliocentric, right? The Atheist Church, amazing, just a good dude. We hang out, and I really love talking to him because again, like how does someone go from like on fire Christian to like I'm an atheist, and not just an atheist, like they're like a materialist. I'm so intrigued by that. Yet his posture is he's very church friendly. He likes Christians, right? So I think that there's value in just having those conversations and hopefully learning from them to maybe help people avoid some of the things that they experienced to the best of our control, right? So that we don't have to go through another mass like deconstruction era like we saw happen in that 2018 to 2021 window of time.
I agree with those two. Number one, in terms of modeling a conversation, what it looks like, agreeing, disagreeing, and be willing to learn from people who see the world differently. Yep. You and I have had this conversation off air about who we platform and who we don't platform. I have a certain system that I kind of work through.
Okay, you're going to have to tell me that because I need some guidance.
Well, I'm not saying I got it figured out. We could come back to that. And, I've made mistakes like everybody has, for and against, and I don't think there's any perfect way to do it. But I'd be curious just when you think about, you've platformed some controversial people, Christians and non-Christians. What are at least some of the principles or thoughts that go through your mind when you're going to platform someone?
I think I try to ask, like, is this a good faith person? Like, are we going to have a good faith conversation, or are they going to assume the worst about my motives, assume the worst about what I represent, or are they going to be open to it and at the very least try and be charitable? So I think that's one of them.
That's fair.
I think I ask, can a conversation be fruitful? Can a conversation be edifying? Because sometimes you might run into someone, but there might not be it may not be fruitful for people. I think I'm also curious, like, is this interesting? Is this person interesting? Is there something going on here that's interesting? And then lately, I've also just been really trying to reevaluate of like, is this a means to some sort of PR fixing? Is this a means because they want access to my audience? And that's as shallow as it goes, right? I'll have people on that are atheist, agnostic, that I actually consider friends. Like I talk to outside of all this YouTube stuff. But I think sometimes people are reaching out and it's like, hey, like we just want to be on here because of this PR campaign we're doing. And that I think is, I don't think that's helpful. And then I'll say, and then also like, if I push back on this person, are they willing to like take it, and are they willing to be challenged, or are they going to melt down and just completely collapse under any degree of pressure? Because I think that the tension in those conversations, I think, is also helpful. And so recently I had a conversation with Sam Collier, who's a pastor that went through a pretty massive scandal while being a pastor, got divorced, and it was pretty messy. And we had like a real conversation of like, dude, are you disqualified? And I had to sit across from him. So I'm like, I wouldn't go to your church. Like I
Mm.
wouldn't sit under your leadership,
Mm.
you know? And not that I think like divorce in every single circumstance is always a disqualifier for ministry, but in this context, like you kind of went through it, and I had to challenge him on that. But like even the appearance of like, hey, you're bringing on a pastor, ex-Hillsong guy who went through a public divorce, really wild allegations, both parts on, you know, with the. Is that interesting, and can that person take it? And Sam took it like a champ. You know, he leaned into the tension.
Did he know going in you were going to press
Oh
him?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah. We
good. That's
we
fair.
had a dinner, and I'm like, hey,
That's
like
fair.
I'm not, and I'm pulling up the scriptures, like, hey man, like Titus, like Timothy, like
Yeah.
how do you rationalize this? Like it seems like there's a standard, and I'm not saying you God can't use you. I think God uses women preachers too. I think God or women like God uses all sorts of people. And so that was like a good conversation. He took it like a champ, and you know he was very gracious. And but like even that conversation is like, how can you talk to this? And I was like, why would we not want to talk to a person that went through this, had the massive blowout, and how can we not learn from something like this? You know,
Good stuff. I got one or two more for you before we jump into your book.
Yep.
What are the questions people ask me all the time, especially youth pastors, teachers? They're like, what are the questions Gen Z and Gen Alpha are asking? I've got my answer based on where I think the data points and just my experience. What questions do you sense tend to be biggest for like maybe college age and down or high school and down?
I think questions around sexuality. High percentage of Gen Z is identifying as a part of the LGTB. I call it LGTB to quote it, LGBTQIU. And you know, the tricky part about that is just like that Q, like that Q kind of means whatever.
It
like,
does.
It's
Questioning, queer.
Yeah, it's just like a junk drawer term,
Yeah.
you know? And so I wonder how much of that is like these people are actually dealing with same-sex attraction in some way, shape, or form versus like, I don't know how I feel about, right? And anyway, I think a high percentage of them are dealing with that.
Yep.
They have questions about that. Why does the Bible forbid these sorts of relations? What does that practically look like? What about my friends? Okay, right. I think there's real questions that they're asking.
Agreed.
And then how does that practically look? Of like, hey, like I'm gonna come to faith in Jesus, but like, wait, I can't have sex with my girlfriend. Wait, I can't look at porn. Wait, you're telling me that like even masturbating is what? You know, I think those are real questions they have because we live in such a hypersexualized culture. And the interesting thing about Gen Z is when I looked at the number, though they're the highest percentage that identify as a part of that community, they're some of the least sexually active. So like the data is like
physically sexually active. Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
And so I think they have a lot of questions about that. I think there's a lot of questions about politics, you know, if I'm honest, and that makes me uncomfortable because again, as someone that like I've been like a centrist guy, sometimes center left, sometimes center right. And I've personally felt pushed in the right, you know? And there's like legitimate questions of like, hey man, like the guys you evangelicals kind of all got behind, he's kind of a questionable dude, you know? And he has some serious things that have been said about him. There's some serious stuff that's been impressed about. There's some stuff he's said and came out of his mouth. How do you reconcile that as a Christian? Like, I think that's a legit question, you know?
Totally fair.
And so I think that's one. And I think that's the age old, like the conversation of hell is always going to come up. And how do we navigate that? And you mean to tell me that people who've never heard about Jesus are going to hell by default? Like, I think that's a conversation.
Hell and evil are kind of the flip side, just suffering, problem in the world, God's judgment, which those are kind of timeless questions I think people will always ask.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's a great response.
I can keep going. I think they got a lot of questions.
Good. No, that's awesome. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
So you started kind of one of the impetuses. I don't even know if that's a word.
It's a word for this podcast.
It is now. Yeah. To start was kind of the Ravi Zacharias scandal. Mm-hmm. That one was heartbreaking on so many levels, just devastating, especially as an apologist to me and so many friends and relationships at RZIM. Unfortunately, that wasn't the last one. They just keep coming, and it's discouraging and it's devastating. It's the kind of people I go, it'll never be that person. So I just don't even literally say that anymore. Do you have a sense of why you think this is happening, what we can learn from it, how we can better respond, maybe a caution for leaders going into, because I don't think any of these people went into it saying they wanted to fall. So what's your sense of why this is happening, what we should learn from it, what we could do better?
Okay, so I'm going to read this verse, and I think this this is what the book's about, but I think this is the antidote to a lot of what we're seeing
Okay.
happening. Okay, so 1 Thessalonians 4, Paul's writing the church in Thessalonica. They're going through it, persecution's breaking out, and they're kind of coasting. So they're becoming apathetic, right? And so that the a man who not work out, not eat, that's from, I think, 2 Thessalonians, right? So Paul tells them this in 1 Thessalonians 4:11, and make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business, work with your own hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anyone. So I think there's so much here with like, what is a quiet life? Because I think people think quiet life and they think be quiet. Like, I don't think that's what a quiet life means. But I do think it means live in a way where you aren't the main character of your world. Live in a way where you have some degree of normalcy and you have some anchors in your life that can mitigate you being the superstar, you being the prodigy, you being the savant, you being the guru, right? And I think we've allowed some of this to creep in, that like main character syndrome that people already kind of naturally have, but then like that in our circles has crept in. And so we have a celebrity culture, and there's a difference between like, hey, you did something excellent and therefore God breathed on your platform and now you have an audience, versus like you're famous for being famous and then you carry yourself as someone that's famous. And so like the world's big on like you're famous for being famous, especially in the last 20 years. And some of that kind of creeps into like now we have folks that are celebrities, and I think the antidote to that is like, hey, we need to humble ourselves. And humility is not the whole, it's not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking about yourself less, right? So quiet life, normalcy, rhythms, consistency in your day-to-day. Go outside, touch grass, be around community, right? And like if someone's in a position of power and leadership, but they're always traveling. They're not at church on Sundays. They're superstar. Like I get to be around celebrities. And the thing about celebrities is they got crazy sleeping patterns. They don't stay in the same place for more than a couple days. They're always moving around. There's no rhythm to their days. And like, I get it. Like a guy like Kanye, like, dude, you just need to wake up in the same place for a year and do the same thing for a year and go deal with your mental health. And so I think like when those dynamics creep into Christian circles, we start thinking we're immune. But it's like, nah, dude, like you can't travel 250 days a year and think you're going to have a thriving marriage and a flourishing local community of believers that are going to keep you accountable. Like, I don't think that's how that works. And so like leading a quiet life, I think is huge, right? And people would say like, hey, Ruslan, like, but you're a public figure.
Right.
And it's like,
that's the follow-up.
Yeah, but like, yes. And anyone that comes to my local city and sees me at church every Sunday, unless I'm preaching at a different church, sees me as accessible, sees me as around, sees me as present. My family's engaged. I'm very immersed in my local community, and I'm submitted and accountable to people. Sometimes when you remove that and you're now a beetle in your little circle of whatever, and it's important work that these guys do. I think that's a recipe for disaster. I think when we get into daily life, right? I think of 1 Peter, right? Let you live such good lives among the pagans that your daily life may win them over, right? So like that daily life, like our lives are way better testimonies than how eloquent we are with our speech. And if we're not impacting our neighbor, like our actual neighbors, and we don't know our neighbors, but we're out here running around speaking at conferences and writing books, but our neighbors don't see our lives. Like that's a problem to me, And so I think like your daily life may win the respect of outsiders. And then this is the last part, which is like, so you will not be dependent on anyone. I think like in a desire to build something and outsource everything, sometimes people don't do anything anymore because they've outsourced it. They got an assistant, they got this person, and it's like, what do you even do anymore besides just talk? Right. And people have like, alleged like, oh, Ruslan's a professional yapper. Right. It's like, you have no idea how immersed I am into the tech, into the lighting, into the camera angles, into the algorithm. Like I'm a practitioner first as a YouTuber. And because there has to be something that you do where you're not just dependent on outsiders. This is speaking specifically financially dependent on outsiders, but like working with your own hands. Like, do you actually do anything besides just talk and pontificate? And I think that would be, if I had to break that down, I think it's those three things. It's like no quiet life, no daily rhythms, too out and about, and there's no, you don't do anything anymore. You just kind of talk professionally.
That's really interesting. I could pull on each one of those. I growing up with a dad who still just, huge influence around the world, probably 80s and 90s, one of the most recognizable Christian figures. Everywhere we went, people
Mhm.
would recognize him. And that was great. That was awesome. But I saw how hard he worked. I saw the cost that when you have a platform, the criticism you take. And in some ways, it just stripped me of the illusion of thinking that is going to make you happy.
Mm.
That's what drives a lot of people. If people, and you talk about in your book, you mentioned how people often recognize you in public.
Mhm.
And there's a part of you that wants recognition to feel worthwhile. That's such a human recognition. I heard James Gunn, obviously the movie creator of like Superman and Guardians of the Galaxy, was like, I just made movies because I wanted to be loved, like a powerful moment.
Mhm.
But you also talk about challenges you mentioned earlier in this interview and in your book, growing up fatherless,
Mhm.
which can create just such a deep desire. Like, I want to be recognized and compensate for not having that love from a father. Growing up in poverty, some people think it's just a lack of financial things, but there can be a deep sense of shame that comes with that.
Mhm.
Success, ambition, material goods can cover up for that and say, no, I'm not that guy anymore. I'm arrived. I'm successful. So in light of your own experience,
Mhm.
I want to know how you mitigate that in your life
Mm.
and what encouragement you would have or warning for those who also come from a sense of brokenness so they don't be caught in just the negative things that come from worldly ambition.
I have a chapter on identity, and I
Mhm.
and I talk about how our identity can't just be what the world says we are, the outside in identity. And J. Warner Wallace kind of helped me coin some. He coined
He's
the
got a great
language.
talk on
He's
that.
gave me some good language for it that I didn't put in the book, but I think it's just cleaner. So outside in identity, like what the world says you are, the validation of the world results that you get. Inside out identity, which is like your subjective whims and feelings about who you are.
Mhm.
There has to be something else. There has to be something transcendent. He calls a top-down identity, right? And so like I am not what I feel I am, and I am not what the world says I am. I'm not just my experiences. I'm actually who Jesus says I am. So if my identity is anchored in who Jesus says that I am, that means I'm not a saint. I'm not a sinner. I'm a saint, right? That I'm the righteousness of God. That I am loved. I am welcomed. I am a friend. I am a disciple. I'm a follower. And so when I have a top-down identity, then the validation isn't needed from the world, and I don't need to mitigate my feelings of shame because Jesus deals with all of that, and not in just in like an abstract sense, but like in a tangible way of meditating on the scripture, allowing the scripture to change me, understanding that hey, it's not just about chasing results; it's about chasing being faithful, not being famous, but being faithful. And so if I'm committed to being faithful, the results will come. So the warning is folks who just want to be famous for the sake of being famous. There are worse things than not being successful,
Mm.
which are being successful at the cost of your soul, right? Being successful at the cost of your faith, being successful at the cost of your marriage. And if folks are just pursuing platform and status and fame as a means in and of itself, man, it is so empty and fleeing and
is.
shallow.
Mm.
And I love what I get to do,
I
but
can tell.
it's not the end all be all. Like like being a dad is way cooler than being a YouTuber. Being a husband is way more fulfilling than speaking on stages. And that I think has to remain like my first ministry is my home. That's at the end of the day is what I'm, hey, Bible verses during dinner, rose and thorn traditions, trying to be immersed in that. And like if we're just pursuing platform and status, man, that it usually will come at the cost of that. And so that's kind of how I think about it is like, man, it's not at all it's cracked up to be. And there's a weight and a heaviness that comes with it. And that's probably the way it should be. Like you should feel like this is something that you shouldn't dabble with. And I know folks that become famous really quick accidentally. It's a weight that they carry. And I'm grateful that like God didn't really breathe on what I was doing until I was 35, 36 years old, in terms of like status, influence, access to money. That stuff didn't come until later. I'm, 12 years married at that point. Like I'm 17 years married now. And I'm grateful. Like, I'm grateful that it was a very slow rise. And even now, like, yeah, there's just so much. There's other things that come with it that people don't factor in.
I totally agree with that, by the way. So your book, Godly Ambition, you sent me an early copy, endorsed it, loved it. Around the same time, the book, The Cost of Ambition, comes out. I'm sure you've seen this. Miroslav Volf, a friend of Biola, did a class with him, fantastic Yale theologian, probably one of the leading public theologians of our day. I thought, how interesting. Here's
maybe me and him could get together and hash it out.
That would be a great conversation. But really, it's you don't so much differ.
Yeah.
What you're saying, as I understand, like ambition is something from God. Here's ways to use it wisely and steward the gifts. He's not saying ambition is bad. He's saying it's really when we have an ambition and we strive to be superior to other people as opposed to excellence. But you're coming at it in the sense of here's how we use ambition. He's like, I have seen it abused, time out. So I don't think it's opposite, it's different concerns. And he's like, one of the things he said in his book, he's like, we see ambition literally everywhere. If you just open your eyes up, he's like, I'm walking through the airport and that guy's walking faster than I am. That guy has better shoes. Like it's literally everywhere in the church. Yeah. And so given our sinful natures, our own insecurities, and the amount of failures we've seen of people trying to be ambitious and it affects them, why not just live quiet lives in the sense of not playing by the playbook of the world and saying, I'm just going to love my neighbor, be good at work, and not even step into this when it can cause so much damage?
Because I think Jesus is calling us to more. And I don't mean more materialism and more stuff. I don't think that's what it is. I think Jesus is calling us more with faithfulness, with stewardship, with management. I think Jesus is calling us more with impact. I think Jesus is calling us more to virtue. And if the pursuit is like, I'm just going to coast, I'm just going to throw it in cruise control, or worse, I'm going to punt it. I'm going to punt it because the world's going to hell in a handbasket and I can't wait for Jesus to return next Thursday. How are we salt and how are we light and how are we ushering in God's ways and God's beauty on this side of eternity? And so I think there's a reorienting of ambition away from a worldly standpoint that I'm trying to do, right? So there's two different words for ambition in the Greek. One of them is the edetheia ambition, the selfish, the clobbering, the probably what we would acknowledge is in our society and in our culture, right? Like I'm sizing people up, I'm gonna, right? Like superiority complex. The scripture absolutely forbids that. That's when we see selfish ambition. It's usually referring that. But the ambition that 1 Thessalonians talks about, the ambition that Paul writes about where he says, I make it my ambition to preach the gospel where others haven't. I make it my ambition to please God. Right, so it's interesting. That's a different word. I'm gonna butcher the Greek. It's phileo monte, I think. And when I was talking to Wes Huff, he broke down the etymology of it and said
sure he did.
There's the phileo is like like Philadelphia, like the brotherly,
the love,
the like it's an ambition out of the love for people, out of an aspiration to serve people, and we see that exhibited in Luke, where at the Last Supper, Jesus washes their feet. He says, one of you guys are going to betray me. He's about to go to the cross. And what do? They start arguing about who's going to be the greatest. Who's going to be the greatest? Who's going to be? And it's like, dude, first of all, like, I mean, come on. Like, just completely misreading the room.
Totally.
Right? And this isn't the first time they've had this argument. They've had this argument multiple times about who's going to be the greatest. They're still expecting a political Messiah, right? And in Luke 22, Jesus does something really interesting. He doesn't rebuke their desire for greatness. He doesn't, which he could have done. He rebuked Peter, right? But he doesn't rebuke their desire for greatness. He had no problem rebuking people. He doesn't reject it. He doesn't say, you dumb people, you don't, what are you doing, right? He redefines what greatness is, and then he redirects it towards serving people. He who wants to be great ought to be the biggest servant of them all, right? I came to you as one who's willing to serve. And when I see that, I go, okay, that's it. Like the pathway to greatness and the pathway towards godly ambition is service, it's stewardship, and it's sanctification. Like it's walking through those things in a way that encompasses the beauty and the goodness of what we're supposed to do here on this side of eternity. And so why not just coast? It is because we have some work to do here. right? And that's controversial because us Protestants, we're like, oh, don't talk about works. I don't want to hear about work salvation.
Well, the Protestant work ethic. Let's go, man.
Hello, Protestant work ethic, right? And so, yeah, I think that's why. Like, I think we have some work to do here and now, and that is a good thing. And that we don't work for grace, we work from grace. And there's also people that there's also okay. This is going to get more practical and controversial. People love to quote 1 Timothy 6, right? For the love of money is the root of all evil, right? They skip 1 Timothy 5, which the Apostle Paul is writing, and he's telling them, he who does not provide for the needs of his family, specifically his immediate family, is worse than a non-believer and has denied the faith. That's one of the most horrifying passages in Scripture.
That's pretty scary.
If you're a young man, and it's like, hey man, you can't provide for your family. And what was that in context of? That wasn't just in context of like, hey, like me and my wife both work and we ship our kids off to public school and right, like no. That's about widows. So he's talking about taking care of the widows in the church who can't remarry, and if they have family, like you need to take care of your old folks. Like you need to care for the folks around you. And not ship them off to homes like we are so prone to do, right? Multi-generational living. And so if we're not extracting that, and then it's specifically your immediate family, right? So if there's no godly ambition, explain to me how we take care of our extended family and our immediate family. Explain to me how in a time where the wealth disparity is just increasing, the housing market is crazy, it's very difficult for people.
It is.
How, and I'm not saying everyone is going to be successful and name it, claim it, blab it, grab it. But if we're not helping and equipping young men to say, hey, I'm a provider and I'm going to figure this thing out and I'm going to put my head down. If we're not equipping people to do that, they're going to have a rude awakening when they're 28, 29, 30, and they have a kid and their wives, which by the way, the vast majority of women prefer to stay home. Not Christian women, not conservative women, women with kids prefer to stay home at least for a season. This is Forbes magazine. This is multiple studies done on this, secular studies. What is going to happen to these folks when they're 30 and they didn't develop any useful skills and they didn't get educated and they're not an asset, they're a liability to their employer? Like, so that's what I mean. Like, so it's like, I think respectfully, I think some of this don't be ambitious comes from a very privileged standpoint. I think some of this, like, you need to learn the Sabbath better. Easy for you to say, Mr. 45-year-old multimillionaire. Yeah. So I get irritated when people are like, I've made it, but like we lose down here. I have a $10-15 million net worth. We lose down here, you know? And it's like, dude, that's not what young men need to hear. Like young men need to be told that like, because Jesus loves them and just transformed them, that they can become the type of person that can impact society, culture, and lead a family well.
And I think this generation, especially boys and young men, are eager for that message. You can make a difference. You have worth. Go for it. And I think that's partly why your channel resonates, and I think why your book will. By the way, Wolf is not saying don't be ambitious. He's very ambitious. He's just saying there's warnings that come along with it. And you talk about those in your book, too.
Let me just, because you're right on, but let me just poke on something real quick.
Do it.
What inspired this book, and I'll tell you who this is offline, and people can piece it together. Several years ago, I saw a viral video clip on Facebook that was titled, "All Ambition is Evil."
Wow.
The person is reading the text that says selfish ambition. He keeps skipping the word selfish, goes on to call ambition demonic, while ironically standing on a well-lit stage in a beautifully assembled outfit with amazing camera angles and a social media team that clipped this together to make it, to knowing this would go viral.
To make it.
How dare you?
That's
how
ridiculous.
dare you tell that to people while exhibiting ambition? Like the irony of something like that. So I'm not speaking about your friend, but I do think that there are people that have called ambition demonic. The world calls it God, and the world says go after it, and then the church goes it's demonic and it's satanic and it's evil. And it's like, man, there's a better way forward. There's a third option that's better.
Totally fair. That's not his point. Here's an example of one thing that he draws out. Is that he says his concern with ungodly ambition, not godly ambition, is that it can naturally build in a sense where we see people as pegs to our achievement and possession and success rather than image bearers. And I see this. Sometimes the way people treat me, I'm like, oh, I see the
Mm.
angle that's going on here because maybe I have a platform or whatever I do. I'm sure you see that with you as well. And honestly, I catch myself sometimes. I'm like, man, am I treating that person differently because I can get something from them rather than somebody made in the image of God I can't get anything from? And my parents often told me, their dating advice was like, watch how somebody treats somebody who
Mm.
you can get nothing from. That tells you their character.
That's good.
And so partly what he's saying is this sense of striving
Mhm.
can lead us to dehumanize people and use them rather than value them. So what safeguards can we put in place when it's like, I want to succeed,
Yep.
I want to make a difference, I want to have godly ambition,
Mhm.
but I don't want to use people. I
That's
want to
good.
love people.
Yeah, I think one, I have a chapter in there on prayer, because I think prayer is,
Okay.
is essential to all of this, right? A consistent rhythm of prayer, and not just prayer for your own dreams and goals. Like I start prayer off with praise, and then I pray for other people before I ever pray for myself. So I'm constantly thinking about other people. I think in a healthy local church community where you are positioning yourself to serve and not just contribute, serve and not just consume, but contribute, that forces you to walk through the process of like, I'm not the center of the universe, kill the main character syndrome, let me consume myself with serving other people. So I think that's a way to do it. And then ultimately, like when I'm meeting people, I'm genuinely asking myself, how can I help this person? How can I serve this person? What do they actually want? What are they after? Right? And what can I do to be a blessing to them? Right? And sometimes it's like nothing. I got nothing for you. Other times it's like, what do you want? Oh, you want to come on my podcast? Okay. You might come on my podcast and it's not going to do what you think it's going to do. Right?
That's true.
Right? It's like,
oh no, this podcast will do what you think it will. Just for the record,
No, but
prepare yourself.
I mean, think of how often I'm sure this happens to you. Is like people are like, hey, like if I could just end up on your thing,
Sure.
then my thing will pop. And it's like, that's not how any
It
of this
doesn't work
works,
that
dude.
way.
You know? And so I'm always trying to consider like, what do people want and can I help? You know, and the 99.9% of people that I meet, man, they just want some affirmation, encouragement. They might have a question or two. They need some prayer. I was leaving the Apple store yesterday. Guy walks up to me, tears in his eyes. Hey man, like I'm going through a breakup. Your content has blessed me. And he can't even speak.
Man.
And like in that moment, he just needed prayer. Like he needed prayer, needed encouragement. I invited him to our free live event that we're doing during a book launch at our church. What church are you in? Who are you connected to? How's it going? How do you like working here? And so I think letting like really serving people, I think is a great way to anchor that. And that requires us to ask questions, because sometimes people don't know how to ask questions. It's like you just, again, main character syndrome, but stopping and slowing down and asking questions. So those are, I think, a few of the safeguards that like, hey, anchor your life in prayer, plug into a local church and serve. Don't just be a consumer, be a contributor. And then I think like when you meet people, figure out what do they need and what do they want, and can you help them do the thing. We can't help everybody. We're not going to change everybody's lives, but we can do little things that can radically move someone's day. Like someone's day can be impacted because they had an interaction with you, you know?
Teaching high school for me for years, I'd like to think helped build some of this in, because I was a youth pastor before and I showed up in high school teaching Bible. I'm like, these kids are going to love me. I'm young, I'm dynamic. And it's like, we don't care who you are. We don't give a rip about that stuff. Is your class interesting or relevant? I had a kid go, what do I have to do to get a C- in your class? Which is like,
wrong question.
I know, but like, and then he came back later and we had a great conversation, but it's just, I want to emphasize for people watching that just doing things in life where people don't know or care who you are, you're just reminded. So you're not just talking about issues, but doing it. Like when I was teaching in high school, it was really interesting. I'd show up and I'd do a retreat at a place. But then when I'm at a Christian school and I'd see people show up and give a retreat and then hear the students process it, I was like, oh, this is very different. I'm getting kind of an inside scoop here. So one of my big encouragements to people who want to be influencers, whatever that means and why, is like, why do you want to do it? How are we going to use your platform? And are you just doing things outside of this where people don't know or care who you are? Hopefully that's going to build in some accountability that's there.
Yeah.
So a question I also want to ask you, people ask me this all the time, and I've got my answer for it. But how do you get so much done, Ruslan? Like, what's your secret, man? You're pumping out, I don't know, 4 videos a week. You're working out. You're doing all this stuff. I'm like, dude, how is he so, I don't even know the word to use, but like just so efficient and knocking out so much stuff?
I would like to think that it's the systems that we build in our day-to-day lives, in our day-to-day rhythms. I attempt to break my weeks and my days down into non-negotiables.
Mm.
And so weekly non-negotiables, like, hey, I'm going to go to church. Non-negotiable. Man, the Catholics and the Orthodox sometimes get it right. Where isn't it like it's like a serious sin if you miss church without good
Yeah.
reason. What is the word? Right? I can't think of the word. But yeah, non-negotiable. Like church is non-negotiable. I get to be in a group of young men, not young men. We're not young anymore. Men our age.
How old are you?
I'm 40 now.
You're young, man.
Yeah.
I'm 49. I'm turning 50
Wow.
in
I was just
2026,
talking to Alan
man.
Parr, and he told me he's turning 50. Man, you guys look great for 50. So like access to community, I think helps a ton. And so those non-negotiables. So daily I just break my day down in daily non-negotiables, right? So James Clear has a quote. He says, "You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems."
Mm.
If you could have all the goals in the world, but if you don't have those daily systems, then it all falls apart. And so for me, I spend less time trying to have goals. Like, I don't have 1 million subscribers by this month, or I want to make this money. I don't have those sorts of goals. I say, hey, I'm going to do the inputs consistently enough that would get me in the ballpark of set goals. But God has to ultimately breathe on those things. God has to make those
Amen to
things
that.
happen, right? Like I can't control if this book becomes a bestseller, right? But I can do the inputs. I can say, man, what are the felt needs of the people I'm speaking to on a regular basis? And how can I write something that can compress time for them? Stuff that it took me 15 years to discover, maybe they can do in 2 years. And if I do that and I do the inputs and I do it well, God can breathe on it. He may not breathe on it, right? I can't control all those variables. So I just consume myself with the daily non-negotiables: health, fitness, outside, touch grass, family time, a weekly rhythm of like making sure me and my wife have good conversations. We check in, we're processing stuff together, right? And I think if we build those non-negotiables, the outcomes will come. I think most people consume too much with the outcomes, or they're doing the wrong non-negotiables. They don't know the inputs to get the outputs, right? And so it's like, if you get the right inputs, so let's just take an example with fitness, right? You and I both know that, hey man, little micro habits, tracking your food, working out, 10,000 steps a day, properly training, right? You do those things long enough, stay in a calorie deficit, you eat the right amount of protein, your body will transform. And I think we underestimate that is applicable to other areas of life, right? So incremental investments lead to monumental advancements. Little small investments every single day. You don't got to be in the gym for 3 hours a day. 30 minutes a day, efficiently, right amount of protein. 6 months from now, a year from now, you look like another human. Why do you think that developing that skill that you know you need to make up so you can be more efficient at your craft, why do you think that's any different, right? Why do you think finances and getting out of debt is any different? It's incremental investments, daily little investments. They lead to monumental advancements. And so that's all in our systems. When we were $100,000 in debt, struggling, living paycheck to paycheck, before YouTube, before I made any real money as a Christian musician, me and my wife listened to Dave Ramsey every single day religiously. We really drank that Ramsey Kool-Aid. We did a budget all the time. We put money in a cash envelope system so we didn't overspend. And we worked our faces off so that when we knew, hey, when we have kids, I want my wife to stay at home. When we have kids, we don't want to be living paycheck to paycheck. And within 18 months, we were debt free, right? And this is in 2011, right? This isn't, like this stuff is possible. But again, like our ambitions are zapped either by the world making ambition God or the church saying it's demonic and it's bad and it's evil. But we need these things, especially if you're coming from poverty. Like, especially if you're coming from single parent household, trauma, serious issues that you need to work out. If you don't develop those systems, man, it's going to be hard.
Systems is huge. One of my, I'd call them my heroes, mentors, friends, William Lane Craig, has just had incredible impact. And his philosophy is like, I'm just going to be faithful and disciplined today. He's got systems: work out, study the Bible, pray, and just chips away at stuff and is disciplined at that. And over time, you have an impact. So that makes sense. Right. So your book is called Godly Ambition. What about somebody who goes, Ruslan, godly ambition, I can't even get out of bed. Like, you're telling me to have godly ambition. I don't even have ambition. So especially today, there's a lot of people we're hearing about depression and anxiety and mental illness.
Yeah.
There's books on like how to get out of bed. What would you say to somebody if they're still watching this going, these guys are talking about trying to change the world, and I mean, I can't even find a job and get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'll look into the camera and just say, like, I don't know what it's like to deal with chronic anxiety. I don't know what it's like to deal with chronic crippling depression. I don't want to speak into something that I don't know. It'd be like you asking me on, like, give people advice on how to raise teenagers. It's like, I don't have no teenagers. I got nothing for you. You know? However, I think sometimes it's latching on to that little bit of hope and saying, what is the next thing you can do right now? Maybe it is literally just getting out of bed. Maybe you can get out of bed, but you just need to go on a walk. If you're in Southern California, we get to take walks in the summertime, right? If you're in other parts of the world, maybe not. Maybe it's going on a walk. Maybe it's, hey, I'm going to pull up a tutorial and learn one thing today, right? So I think it's latching on to that next step. And in that may mean, hey, I might need to go see a therapist. Hey, I might need to go deal with this in a way where you might need to take medication for a season. But I would say, what is that one thing you can do? And that one little thing can lead into another thing and another thing and another thing. And then before you know it, the needle moves. But I would be here faking the funk, Sean, if I was like, I've dealt with crippling anxiety where I couldn't get out of bed for months. That's heavy. And that's something different. And that's something that I think I think can really debilitate people. And so I would say, seek help, seek treatment. I think we need to stop making that taboo in Christian circles. There are people that need treatment, need therapy, may need medication. I would say, and maybe that's the first step. And then from there, it's what can you tangibly do? Is it just going outside and going on a walk? Is it pulling up a tutorial and trying to learn something new? Baby steps. And
That's great.
Yeah, I ain't got much on this.
That's fair. No, that's totally fair. I'm not an expert on some of the crippling depression. You know, one thing I just would throw in there is, it's true for anybody, like, give ourselves some grace.
Yeah.
Like, just, that's the root of the Christian faith. We all need grace in different ways. Sometimes people need grace because it's like, I just worked too hard and I strove too much, the opposite side. You just need some grace because your identity is not rooted in success. It can be on both sides, whatever it is. You know, the other thing I've really learned is having a father has been incredibly ambitious in his life. I still don't know how he spoke at 1,200 universities, 160 books. I mean, just incredible. And for me to survive in terms of what I do is I gave up comparison games a long time ago.
That's good.
I have no interest in being the next Josh McDowell, whatever. That's a losing game. I ask myself, what gifts has God given me? What opportunity has he given me? And how do I faithfully keep moving forward and doing better? And that's actually one of the things Wolf talks about. He's like, don't compare yourself to anybody else. Just compare yourself to where you were with the hope that you're moving forward. And that's some of what you're saying. It's just like, do one thing today and move forward. And so I would definitely say, for people who are ambitious and want to accomplish things, like, don't compare yourself to others. I don't compare myself to you. I don't compare myself to William Lane Craig. Like, let's celebrate the differences of what people are accomplishing for the kingdom. I have two more questions for you, and then we'll wrap up. But from the moment I met you, and it feels like it's only been about 3 years, is right away, I remember seeing your channel. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is. I didn't know anything about him, didn't know your music, my bad. Right away, one of the things that struck me is like, wow, he's a collaborator. I wonder if this is genuine just because I didn't know you. I mean, the more I probe in, I'm like, wow, this guy really is celebrating other people's success. We're at ETS, and you're like bringing all the YouTubers together, having a meal, talking, collaborating. How do we help each other out? Where does that heart come from? And how can we be better collaborators that celebrate the success of others rather than be threatened by it or compare ourselves to them?
collaboration does a couple things for me. One, it eliminates that selfish competitive spirit where I have to clobber, that selfish ambition. So if I'm collaborating, I don't see any of my colleagues as competition. I just don't see the world that way. Like I don't see it in a zero-sum game of like, if people watch your channel, they'll be less likely to watch my channel. I think there's enough people out there and enough people that everyone could be successful on these platforms. Now, somebody will say, but that's not how math works, right? Like I serve a supernatural God of multiplication.
It's not a fixed pie. People are listening to more content in different ways.
Yes,
so
yes,
you're
exactly.
Right.
So one, I think it anchors me to say, let me kill that like unhealthy competition that I naturally had as a rapper, that like, which is, it's very competitive, it's very self-centered. Let me kill that. I think another thing that it does for me and is that I'm not trying to build a cult of personality. I have zero desire to build a cult following, right? Because that's not healthy either. And that's the name of the game as an entertainer, is like niche down, cult of personality, you're the guy, you're the niche, right? And then also when I collaborate, it takes the pressure off of me to be the expert, because I'm not an expert. You're the expert in your field.
That makes me nervous, but keep going.
Well, no, I mean you're educated, you have your doctorate, you're a professor. I could point to actual experts, and then that takes the pressure off of me to be this guy that I'm not. I don't know anything about I know what Wes Huff tells me, okay? I don't know anything about manuscripts, right? So I'm going to point to Wes. I'm going to say, hey, this is really good. You know,
awesome.
Check him out. Like, so I think when we collaborate, then we can actually lean in and celebrate other people's expertise. And this is a practical hack for people trying to get on social media. Stop trying to be the source of everything and be the expert at 23 years old on TikTok. Highlight some other voices of some other experts, and that takes the pressure off of you to not pretend to be this person that you're not. And so I've just, the more I've gotten into it, I'm like, man, I can't do what Mike Winger does. The dude talks like ChatGPT before ChatGPT existed. Like 11-hour video on women in ministry.
Oh, bro.
I've never even seen a video that long on YouTube, right? This is crazy. Let me point to him and celebrate him.
I agree.
Because he's just wired different. He's like a savant in the way his brain works, and he can go deep and hundreds and probably thousands of hours of research on videos. Let me celebrate other people. So I think there's very practical things in that, and I think I was so jaded with the Christian rap world where I came out. Right now it's much better, but I came out of a very cutthroat, and this is weird to say about Christian rap, but I came out of this very like competitive, ego-driven era that like when I got into this, everyone was just nice and friendly and willing and not like holding back compliments, you know? And I'm like, yeah, like let me point to other people. I think it serves so many practical things, and I genuinely love our space. Like there's nothing like our space. It's really awesome, and everyone is very kind, and most folks are 100 times better than they are on camera in terms of just how generous they are.
I agree with that. That's my experience. You know, I distinctly remember a camp called Camp of the Woods, probably 20 years ago. My dad, Frank Turk, and myself were speaking, and when it was done, my dad said, he goes, my books are in the back, but if you buy one book, he goes, buy Frank Turk's book. That's the most important one. I don't remember what Frank talked on. I don't even remember what my dad talked on. But that had an impression on me. And I'm not saying I do this perfectly, but like some of the just competition and criticizing people, just it wears me down. And there's a time and place to correct. People give me correction. I'm like, you're right. Learn from that one. Keep going. But like cheering people on and collaborating, the enemy is too great to spend too much time not doing that. All right, last question. I'm curious, what are you leaning into on your channel right now, like moving forward? Like for me, I'm really convinced that things like near-death experiences, supernatural encounters are real. And I don't think a lot of people are doing it carefully and well. And I think apologetics, afterlife apologetics, is something I'd love to see way more apologists lean into. That's one thing I'm focusing on. But tell me one or two things moving forward that you're going to be focusing on.
Yeah. And by the way, we reacted to one of your near-death experience videos last week, which was
nice.
Great. Yeah, it was really good. That whole conversation is so fascinating. Yeah, I think we're trying to figure out how to integrate some of the chapters from the book into the content, so that way there's a more robust experience we're creating for people. So as the book is coming out, I'm speaking more, I'm preaching at churches, we have the Bless God Summit. We're trying to really integrate some of that into the content and go a little deeper in the practical sense of sanctification, right? Meaning that
Good.
like it's really easy to just like boom, hit them with the gospel. Okay, yes, hit them with the gospel. Every video to me should go back to the gospel in some way, shape, or form. But I think it's like hit them with the gospel and then like what are we saved to? And I'm trying to really integrate that into the conversations. And I think also just being more intentional with good podcasting. Like I think we want to have really good conversations like this that I'm spending time, well-researched, going through people's books and trying to drive up and trying to figure out how to package that in a way that's interesting and intriguing to the audience. Yeah.
I love it. Well, you're on Instagram. You're on X, right?
Yeah, barely.
I was like, right. I don't remember seeing a ton on there now and then. YouTube channel is great. Some of my team, they're like, we listen to everything he throws out there. Book, Godly Ambition. Thanks for giving me a chance to endorse it.
Yeah,
I think
thank
it's
you for
excellent.
endorsing it.
Oh, I would highly recommend it. I guess I can say this being maybe a decade older than you, but just really appreciate you. Proud of you. Just want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. I know you're honoring the Lord and making a difference.
Hey, thank you for having me. This was a surreal moment in many ways, right? Getting to meet your dad, getting to have this conversation, you endorsing the book. It's been really humbling to say the least.
Well, Lord willing, this is just the beginning of many more.
Amen.